Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of Diddy Combs' trial, as reported by Inner City Press. What did Diddy's former private chef reveal that sent him into a complete rage in the middle of the federal courtroom? What secret recipes was she forced to prepare behind closed doors at his infamous parties? And why did prosecutors say her testimony could be the final nail in the coffin for the music mogul's defense? In a federal courtroom where Diddy Combs faces serious accusations. His former executive chef made an unexpected entrance, not as a celebrity, not as a friend, but as a witness, a woman who spent years in his kitchen preparing meals for his family and guests at his most private gatherings. A woman who claimed she was forced to cook unusual concoctions with specific ingredients for parties where guests would later appear disoriented and vulnerable. And then came the bombshell. The chef didn't just speak about food. She presented documented recipes, text messages, and a food diary spanning 5 years of employment. Evidence so damning that Diddy slammed his fist on the table, shouting at his lawyers while the courtroom fell silent. The security officers immediately moved toward him as the judge called for order. Why would this chef risk everything after signing multiple NDAs? What pushed her to come forward now knowing she could face serious legal and professional consequences? And what ingredients in those recipes made prosecutors immediately request additional testing from the D? This isn't just about unusual food preferences or celebrity eccentricities. The chef's testimony connects directly to the broader allegations against Diddy, revealing a methodical system where culinary skills were allegedly weaponized to facilitate the very crimes at the center of the trial. The full story, raw and unfiltered, begins with the chef's testimony. And what she's revealed ensures you'll never look at celebrity private chefs the same way again. If you're new to our channel, please hit that like button and subscribe for more breaking updates on this developing case. I'm standing outside the Manhattan Federal Courthouse where one of the most shocking testimonies in the Diddy Combs trial has just concluded. The atmosphere here is electric, with reporters rushing to file their stories and legal analysts attempting to process what many are calling a game-changing moment in these proceedings. Moments ago, Maria Gonzalez, the former executive chef who worked for Diddy for 5 years, emerged from the courthouse. Her face was drawn, eyes reflecting exhaustion, but also what appeared to be relief. She declined to speak with the waiting press, but her attorney made a brief statement, saying only that Ms. Gonzalez told the truth under oath, regardless of the consequences to her career. Inside that courtroom, the air grew thick with tension as Gonzalez took the stand. Diddy Combs, the music mogul who once commanded respect across the entertainment industry, sat watching, his usual composed demeanor initially intact. That wouldn't last long. Nobody expected Gonzalez to bring actual evidence. The room fell silent when she mentioned the documentation she had maintained throughout her employment. Eyes focused on the prosecution table as they introduced exhibits, journals, recipe books, text message logs until Diddy suddenly lost his composure. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Even the judge seemed startled. No announcement, no warning. Just Diddy slamming his fist down and shouting at his defense team. Until that moment, Diddy had maintained a collected presence throughout the trial. But something had changed. Maybe it was the specific details Gonzalez recalled with perfect clarity. Maybe it was the time-stamped photos she had secretly taken of unusual ingredients she was instructed to purchase. Maybe it was the text messages projected on the courtroom screen showing his explicit instructions about what needed to be prepared before specific guests arrived. Whatever triggered it, Diddy was done with his calm facade. He wasn't sitting there as a music mogul or cultural icon. He was there as an employer who never expected his chef to document everything, a man who'd seen too much and said too little. And when she began to describe the effects she witnessed after serving certain dishes at his direction, the courtroom wasn't prepared for what they would hear. Because what Maria Gonzalez revealed about the special menus, the separate preparations for different guests, and the aftermath of those private dinners wasn't just disturbing. It corroborated testimony from previous witnesses, and connected dots that prosecutors had been carefully laying out for weeks. What looked like normal food and drinks, allegedly concealed substances that affected guests without their knowledge. A central element in the broader trafficking and assault allegations against Diddy. Her testimony wasn't just about exposing unusual culinary practices. It was about revealing a system where food and beverages allegedly became vehicles for control. And Diddy's explosive reaction suggested she had struck a nerve that is carefully constructed. Defense wasn't prepared to address it. Started like any other day of the trial. The room buzzed with low conversations. The press hunched in their designated rows and lawyers whispered strategies as they waited for the next witness to be called. But when Maria Gonzalez entered and was sworn in, the room changed. You could hear a pin drop. Some people thought it might be a minor testimony after all. What could a chef really contribute to such serious allegations? But the way she walked to the stand, shoulders squared despite her obvious nervousness, told everyone this was different. The judge raised an eyebrow as the prosecution introduced her. Credentials: trained at the Culinary Institute of America, previous experience at Michelin-starred restaurants, and personal chef to several high-profile clients before being hired by Diddy in 2017. And Diddy, who'd been reviewing documents with his lawyers, suddenly looked up, his expression shifting from disinterest to intense focus. Gonzalez settled into the witness chair. No eye contact with anyone. She didn't even glance at Diddy. Miss Gonzalez, can you tell the court about your employment with Mr. Combs? The prosecutor began. I was hired as his executive chef in 2017, she said, her voice steady despite her hands tightly clasped in her lap. I was responsible for all meals at his main residence, special events, and private parties. I was told from the beginning that discretion was the most important part of my job, even more important than my cooking skills. The judge allowed her to continue. And from that moment on, the entire trial shifted because what Gonzalez was, I'm about to say, wasn't part of any media narrative or social media speculation. It was something that had haunted her for years. Gonzalez explained how the job started normally preparing healthy meals for Diddy and his family. Catering business, meetings, standard tasks for a private chef to the wealthy. The pay was exceptional. The working conditions luxurious, though the hours were long and unpredictable. About 6 months in, things changed. She testified. Mr. Combs began hosting what he called special gatherings, parties with very specific catering requirements. She described receiving detailed instructions for these events, separate menus for different guests, specific ingredients that had to be purchased personally by her from particular sources, and unusual preparation methods. At first, I thought it was just celebrity eccentricity, she continued. Many wealthy clients have unusual food preferences or dietary restrictions, but these weren't about preferences or allergies. The prosecutor asked her to elaborate. The instructions became increasingly specific about which guests received which preparations. Some dishes looked identical but contained different additives. I was told these were wellness supplements or energy enhancers that certain guests had requested. Gonzalez described how Diddy would personally oversee these preparations, sometimes texting her detailed instructions just hours before guests arrived. She was often required to prepare separate servings for specific guests, identical in appearance, but with added ingredients that weren't part of the standard recipe. Became concerned when I noticed patterns in how guests behaved after consuming these preparations, she said. Some became noticeably disoriented. Others became extremely passive or compliant. Some would have little memory of the evening the next day when they'd returned for breakfast. The chef explained that her suspicions grew when she was instructed to clean specific glasses personally and return them directly to Diddy's staff rather than leaving them for the regular cleaning service. There was one particular drink served in black glasses that seemed to have the most pronounced effect. Guests who consumed it would appear normal for about 20 minutes, then their behavior would change dramatically. Gonzalez testified that when She began asking questions about these special preparations. Diddy's attitude toward her changed. He pulled me aside at one event and said, "You're here to cook, not to think. The recipes are mine. You're just the hands that make them." His tone wasn't just employer to employee. It was threatening. She described how after that conversation, she began documenting everything, keeping copies of instructions, photographing unusual ingredients, and maintaining a detailed diary of which guests received which preparations and how they appeared. Afterward, "I wasn't just a chef anymore," she testified, her voice growing stronger. "I felt like I was becoming complicit in something dangerous, and I needed to protect myself. I've kept a lot inside for a long time." As she addressed the court, "I've cooked for presidents. I've prepared meals for royalty. I've won culinary awards. But none of that can hide what I saw, what I was made to do, and who made it happen." She turned slightly toward Diddy. "You did?" Gonzalez told the courtroom that her involvement in what she now understands was a systematic operation began, like many stories in the entertainment industry do, with excitement and ambition. It came through a prestigious culinary placement agency. The way they framed it, it was supposed to be the opportunity of a lifetime personal chef to one of music's biggest mogul. "They told me it would make my career, that I'd never have to worry about work again. I'd been to celebrity kitchens before, so I didn't question it. But the moment Gonzalez signed her unusual employment contract, she knew something was off. The NDA was 26 pages long. My lawyer said it was the most restrictive he'd ever seen. Specific clauses prohibited me from discussing meal preparations, ingredients, or even who attended dinner parties. The security deposit against breaking the NDA was $250,000. That should have been the first red flag. They said it was for celebrity privacy, to protect against tabloids learning about dietary habits or dinner guests. But it felt like something else, like they were building legal walls around what happened in that kitchen. She was isolated. Within the operation, there were cameras everywhere, even in the food storage areas and above preparation stations. It felt like someone was always watching. Gonzalez said that after about 8 months of employment and several special gatherings, Diddy approached her directly in the kitchen late one night. He said something like, "Your food is becoming essential to these evenings." That smile, it wasn't appreciation for my culinary skills. It was satisfaction with how I was serving a different purpose. The prosecutor then displayed a series of text messages between Diddy and Gonzalez, dated from 2018 to 2022, 3 hours before the party. "I need you to prepare the special menu for the marked guests. Read one message. Use the supplies in the black case. Follow exact measurements." Another text sent before guests arrived. "Jay will get version 2. Kay gets the regular. Everyone else gets version 1. No mistakes tonight." Gonzalez identified multiple messages referencing different versions of the same dishes and drinks with specific instructions about which guests should receive which preparation. "I began to realize I was being used to administer substances to people without their knowledge." She testified the special ingredients weren't just party enhance or recreational drugs that people were knowingly taking. Guests thought they were simply enjoying cocktails or food. They had no idea they were consuming powerful combinations that would affect their ability to consent or even remember the evening. The prosecutor then introduced Gonzalez's food diary into evidence, a detailed log of meals, special preparations, and her observations of guest behaviors. August 15, 2019. Female guest Kay given special version of passion fruit cocktail at 10:45 p.m. By 11:20, barely responsive but still walking. Led to private room by DI security, returned to main area. At 1:30 a.m., disoriented, helped to car. Similar entries documented dozens of incidents over years, with Gonzalez noting patterns in which guests received altered food and beverages and their subsequent behavior as the prosecution displayed time-stamped images of unusual ingredients not typically found in professional kitchens. These were kept in a separate locked refrigerator that only I and one of Mr. Combs' personal assistants had access to. Gonzalez identified bottles of clear liquids without proper labeling, powders and measured packets and other substances she was instructed to incorporate into specific preparations. I didn't know exactly what these were, but I knew they weren't culinary ingredients, she testified. When I asked questions, I was told they were imported supplements or exclusive enhancers that guests knew about and expected. The most damning evidence came when the prosecution displayed a video. Gonzalez had secretly recorded showing her being instructed by one of Diddy's assistants on how to prepare drinks with specific amounts of unmarked substances. Make sure it's completely dissolved, the assistant said in the video. It should be undetectable but still effective. More for the newcomers, less for the regulars. Gonzalez explained that she began to suspect these substances were more than party drugs when she observed the same patterns repeatedly. Guests receiving altered food or drinks, becoming disoriented or unusually compliant, and then being separated from groups or led to private areas of the house. I realized I wasn't just preparing food, she said, her voice breaking slightly. For the first time, I was being used to facilitate whatever happened after guests consumed what I had made. It was at this point in her testimony that Diddy slammed his fist on the table and had to be warned by the judge to maintain composure. The moment that sent shockwaves through the courtroom and signaled just how damaging Gonzalez's testimony had become to his defense. Gonzalez said she followed Diddy into his home office one evening, thinking they were going to discuss the menu for an upcoming event. Instead, what she saw shook her to the core. There were photographs spread across his desk. Some I recognized from parties I'd catered. Some showed guests in compromising positions. Some looked like they had been taken without the subject's knowledge. And Diddy, he was sorting through them like they were business documents, occasionally setting one aside in what appeared to be a keep pile. She paused, swallowing hard. I didn't know how to leave. And that was the point. Once you're in, Gonzalez continued, her voice steady but hollow. A few days after witnessing the photos, I got a call. Blocked number. All the voice said was, chefs who see too much tend to disappear from the industry. Kitchens have so many accidents. Then they hung up. She thought it was just an attempt to scare her until a manila envelope arrived at her apartment. It was unmarked. Inside was a USB drive. I almost didn't look, but I did. It contained video from inside Diddy's kitchen showing me preparing the special recipes, handling the unmarked ingredients, serving the altered dishes. I don't remember cameras at those angles, but there I was on video doing exactly what could implicate me. There was a voice over the footage, Diddy's voice, saying, "Now we both have something to lose." Gonzalez testified that the fear she felt in that moment was unlike anything she'd experienced in her life. I realized I wasn't just hired as a chef. I was enlisted as an accomplice. She explained that after receiving the USB, she understood. She was trapped in a system designed to ensure her silence and continued participation. I'd prepare the regular menu for most guests, but always receive specific instructions for special guests, usually new people or those who appeared to be potential business partners or romantic interests. The prosecution displayed a series of text messages between Gonzalez and Diddy's personal assistant detailing which guests should receive which preparations at various events. Make sure the new girl gets the special dessert. Jay needs the extra attention in her second cocktail. Tonight, the producer should get the regular version he needs to stay sharp. Gonzalez explained the code system that developed phrases like extra attention, special care, or the premium experience, all referred to adding substances to food or drinks. It was methodical, she testified. It wasn't random or impulsive. There were patterns to who received altered food when they received it, and what happened to them afterward. She described how guests who consumed these preparations would often exhibit similar symptoms. Initial euphoria followed by disorientation, increased suggestibility, and frequently memory gaps. The following day, some would return for brunch. The next morning, looking confused or embarrassed. Some would ask me if I remembered what had happened the night before. I was instructed to always say I was busy in the kitchen and didn't see anything. Gonzalez explained that her role expanded beyond just preparation. She was expected to monitor which guests had consumed the altered food and alert certain staff members when the effects appeared to be taking hold. I became part of a system I didn't fully understand but couldn't escape. Every time I considered leaving, I was reminded of the videos, the NDA, and how it would look if I was implicated in drugging people. She testified that on multiple occasions she attempted to warn guests by suggesting alternative food or drinks only to be closely monitored by Diddy's security team. Once I tried to switch a drink and within minutes I was called to Diddy's office. He showed me footage of what I'd done and said, "That was your one mistake. There won't be a second," through tears. Gonzalez described how she began documenting everything as protection and eventually as evidence, keeping her food, diary, taking photos when possible, and saving text messages despite the risks. I realized I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was gathering proof of what was happening to these people who had no idea what was in their food and drinks, Gonzalez said. That's when the manipulation began to intensify. To industry events. As Diddy's acclaimed chef, I was introduced to other celebrities, offered opportunities to cater high-profile events. My career was taking off in ways I'd always dreamed about. But she quickly learned these opportunities came with expectations. People I had contracts with stopped returning my calls. Rumors started online that I was difficult to work with, that I had stolen recipes, that I had health code violations in my catering business. I knew what it was. It was pressure. Diddy didn't need to make direct threats. He just made it clear that my success or failure depended on my cooperation. And so for years, Gonzalez said nothing. She continued working for Diddy, preparing both legitimate meals and the special ones. She smiled through food segments on morning shows, wrote cookbook proposals, and built her brand. Been at one of those parties coming forward with allegations of not remembering what happened, of waking up in strange places, of feeling violated but not knowing the details. I thought, if they're speaking up, why am I still quiet? She looked around the courtroom, glanced at the jury, and leaned closer to the microphone. It wasn't just the videos of me preparing those dishes. That was the leash. She said from that moment on, everything she did felt like it had invisible strings attached to it. She explained that instructions would come through security. I'd be told which guests needed special attention and what would happen if I didn't comply. When I expressed concerns about one guest who seemed particularly vulnerable, the very next day, she said this pattern of reward and punishment didn't happen once or twice. It became a constant reality. Diddy didn't have to make explicit threats. He had systems that did it for him. He had connections throughout the entertainment industry with producers, directors, talent agencies, event planners. He knew who to call. He knew how to make opportunities appear out of nowhere and how to make them vanish just as fast. The prosecution presented screenshots of emails showing how quickly Gonzalez's professional opportunities would disappear after instances where she had questioned instructions or attempted to modify the special preparations. Came last year, she testified. A young woman, an aspiring singer, attended one of the parties. She was served what Diddy called the welcome drink, one of the strongest formulations I was forced to prepare. I watched her go from chatting excitedly about her career to barely being able to form sentences within an hour. Gonzalez described how she attempted to intervene by offering the guest water and suggesting she needed fresh air, only to be immediately intercepted by security and removed from the main area of the house. The next morning, I saw her leaving. She was crying, couldn't find her phone, and didn't seem to remember how she'd gotten to a bedroom on the 3rd floor when the party had been on the main level. When she asked me what had happened, one of Diddy's assistants appeared and ushered her out before I could respond. 2 weeks later, Gonzalez saw the same young woman on an entertainment news program, looking uncomfortable as the host asked about her mentorship with Diddy. That's when I knew I couldn't be part of this system anymore, regardless of the consequences to my career or the legal risks any longer. Her voice broke as she added, I started as a chef, someone who brings joy through food. He turned me into an accomplice to whatever happened to those people after they ate what I had prepared. Gonzalez's voice dropped to a quieter, deeper tone. I stayed quiet for 5 years. I convinced myself it wasn't what I thought it was or that it wasn't my responsibility. But then the federal investigation started and victims began coming forward. She said the first time she heard about the allegations against Diddy in the news. Then I got a call not from my agent or friends, but from one of Diddy's lawyers. They said, Maria, whatever you think you know about meal preparation for Mr. Combs' events needs to stay in the kitchen. People are watching this situation closely. Described feeling like the floor had dropped from under her. I didn't even know the FBI was investigating these parties. But once I accepted they were, everything else started to connect. Gonzalez said she stayed up all night replaying memories. It was all a system and I was a crucial part of it. The person who administered substances without the victims even knowing. She said the breaking point wasn't fear, it was shame. I realized that if I didn't speak now, my silence would become my legacy. I couldn't live with that. My family would see these headlines. My culinary students might see them. I called the number from the news report and said, I was Diddy's chef. I know about the drinks and the food. Whatever you need, whatever questions you have, I'll answer them. She looked at the jury. I wasn't just a chef. I was used. I was recorded. And I was blackmailed. Then she looked directly at Diddy. This time with a steadier gaze. And you knew exactly what you were doing when you turned my culinary skills into weapons against your guests. The prosecutor asked her final question. Ms. Gonzalez, in your professional opinion, as a trained executive chef, was there any legitimate culinary purpose for the substances you were instructed to add to certain preparations? Gonzalez's answer was immediate and clear. Absolutely not. These weren't flavor enhancers or trendy ingredients. In culinary terms, there is only one word for secretly adding substances to someone's food or drink to create physiological effects. They haven't consented to poisoning. You're lying, he shouted, his voice echoing through the courtroom. You were nothing before me. The judge immediately called for order as security moved toward Diddy. His lawyers tried to restrain him, but he shook them off, pointing at Gonzalez. The outburst confirmed what many in the courtroom had suspected. Gonzalez's testimony had struck at the truth, and Diddy's carefully maintained composure had finally cracked under the weight of exposure as he was forced back into his seat. Still fuming, Gonzalez remained calm, her ace never leaving his. That's the difference between us, she said quietly, though the microphone carried her words clearly. I can still look at myself in the mirror. She stood from the witness chair. Her posture straighter than when she had entered hours earlier. You built an empire out of manipulation. You called it entertainment. You called it mentorship. You called it business. But all you built was a system to exploit people who trusted you. Diddy didn't respond. He sat there motionless, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. Gonzalez didn't blink. I saw what you did to those guests. I saw what you made me do to them. I heard the things you said about them when they weren't conscious enough to hear you. You broke people for power and entertainment. Then Gonzalez pulled something from her pocket. A chef's knife pin, small silver, and worn from years of use. This was given to me when I graduated culinary school. That's the chef I used to be. She held it up for the court to see. I haven't worn it in years. Gonzalez turned to the jury. If you think this is just about unusual party drinks or celebrity eccentricities, you're missing the bigger picture. This is about a system designed to facilitate abuse while maintaining deniability. And if we don't confront it, it will continue throughout the entertainment industry. Then she faced Diddy one last time. You once told me in this business, everyone has a role to play. Well, I'm done playing mine. She walked back to the stand, gathered her belongings, and exited the courtroom without looking back. And Diddy, he sat there pale and rigid, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. Because for the first time in decades, he wasn't the one controlling the narrative. When Gonzalez stepped outside the courthouse, she didn't look like someone who had won a victory. She looked like someone who had finally put down an unbearable weight. The crowd of reporters parted as she walked through, her attorney shielding her from questions, later reportedly responded, "Truth isn't a relief, it's a responsibility." But outside the courtroom, the world was only beginning to process the implications. The culinary industry went into shock as fellow celebrity chefs called emergency meetings. Talent agencies representing private chefs issued statements distancing themselves from the practices described. Entertainment executives who had attended Diddy's infamous parties began consulting with crisis management teams. Behind closed doors, investigators were reviewing guest lists from years of events. Public relations firms sent urgent messages to clients who might be implicated. And while many in Hollywood claimed to be shocked, social media was already connecting dots that had been visible for years. Fans weren't just disturbed, they were outraged. Outraged that someone like Gonzalez had been coerced into becoming an unwilling accomplice. Outraged that victims had been dismissed for years when they tried to explain their experiences. And outraged that an industry had protected these practices for so long, the era of silence was finally ending. And if you want to stay updated on this developing story and other breaking news in the entertainment industry, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for daily updates as this historic trial continues. News.